Yeah.
So on High Noon and Morning Report, it seemed like more instruments were being introduced, just like you mentioned, like a horn section, different things. Um, was that a conscious choice where the band, wants to expand the sound? And I guess you said Max never wants to make the same album twice.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So a lot of that does come from like, hey, like I remember with, it's funny because like, if you listen to Michigan Left, as we said, like there are strings throughout the record. Like Whistleblower has a string arrangement that leads into the song. I think there's strings in the bridge too, or something. And Michigan Left has strings in the bridge of the song. And so it's not like totally out of the vocabulary of the band. But I know with High Noon, Max was like, yo, we need like this. I never thought it was the first one that he was like, can you do a string arrangement and just make it like grandiose and like actually, instead of like a synthesizer doing it, let's get a real string section, like write a thing for a real string section. And then there was some stuff like, can we do some brass stuff? So, I like just going to school, like literally like, I had like a contact book full of like horn players, some of who are still playing with us, right? And in the band live, right? So yeah, I don't know if it was I don't know how much of a conscious decision it was, other than just, can we do it, and then if it works out, it works out. Yeah.
So then after High Noon, you have Morning Report that comes out. My favorite songs are And Then Some, Savannah, and Passenger Seat. So it's funny, like it's not the singles. It's
Yeah.
again, everyone's different, right? Everyone, people gravitate towards this single or that single or a deep album cut. Those are the ones that I loved when I was listening to it. So
Totally.
this album produces more number one singles, more platinum singles, two more Juno nominations. You've mentioned you don't really think about it much, but for you, this is the sophomore album for you with the Arkells.
Yeah.
A lot of times there's the dreaded sophomore slump, and here you guys are with just more success. Um, I guess I had questions about if you're feeling pressure with the sophomore album, but I'm assuming with how we've talked so far that you probably just made the album and you weren't thinking that much about the pressure.
No, no, not at all. No. It's a really fun collaborative group to make music with, like there's not, again, I don't want to speak on behalf of everybody. Like I don't know how much pressure Max feels, like I know he genuinely loves, at least my vibe with him is that he loves to song, right? And 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 that makes it fun, right? Because then it doesn't become about what you should be doing or how are you going to pull something off or impress people or whatever. It becomes more about like the creative process, which it should be, so it becomes more like, and then look, there are moments where we go, oh, this is big, we should do that, like of course, right? We all want to be successful, but a lot of it just comes down to like, can we, and I think that's such a cool attitude to have, where you're just like, hey, can we put synths on this? Can we put a drum beat on this, or like a drum machine on it? Can we do like, I remember like, talking about, maybe things that are like, oh, like now it's piano centric, but also like harmony wise, like I remember like something like Come to Light being like, hey, can we do like an Eagles style vocal arrangement in the chorus? Because like all of a sudden you have this chorus where like the song was in such a weird key where Max in the verses is like in his register and it's perfect, and then in the choruses he drops a little bit, like, and it goes down, and that's not really a thing that you would do, but for him to go up, it would have been crazy high, and then if we moved the key of the song down, then the verses would have been too low. So it's like, how do you fix that problem? It's like, well, what do the Eagles do? It's like 10 people singing different harmonies stacked on top of each other and everything, and so we kind of did that with the chorus. There's not really like, I mean, there is the melody, then you can hear what he's doing, and that's definitely pushed forward in the mix. But if you listen to it, like there's like two vocal harmonies above him, and it holds it together enough that then the verse comes in, and it sounds like in the perfect register for him, right? So um yeah, I think it's just the attitude of like, are these things possible and can we do it, and just not being like, well, it's not going to be cool because the critics are not going to like it. Like, I don't know. Or even if fans don't like it, then they don't like it. Like, what are you going to do? Right. Like,
First and foremost,
fingers crossed.
the band has to like it.
Yeah, we like it. We like, we're not doing anything we don't want to do. Like there's not, maybe between five guys, you're always going to have one guy that's like, well, you know what I mean? Like, of course, you can't, it's impossible to have everyone on board all the time.
There's always one Karen in the group,
Yeah. And it's always a different Karen, you know what I mean? Like, sometimes I'm the fucking Karen, like, we're just playing music that we want to play, and we're arranging it the way we want to arrange it, and we're lucky that we can do that. And everyone has the same attitude, very lucky.
We have a question from Chantal McKee from Carrot River, Saskatchewan. It sounds like a delicious place to live. She wants to know, what's your songwriting process? So that's very, very wide, very open. I guess the question is, sometimes when you write a song, you have a great idea lyrically, and then you figure out a vocal melody, and then you figure out the music to it. Sometimes you have an amazing piano riff that you want to feature, or a guitar riff, and you build around that. There's a million ways to write a song. I guess she's curious, do your songs usually come together in a specific way, or is it just things jump out and you build around them?
Yeah, probably the latter, right? Like, so it is very different from song to song. A lot of I would say 85% of the time, maybe 90% of the time, Max comes with an idea that either he's made on GarageBand, or he's made a voice memo at the piano, or sometimes he goes and does like songwriting sessions with people, like, private school, for example. He went to LA and did a writing session. They put together the song and then brought it back to us. And we were like, okay, well, what can we add to it that makes it feel now like the band, you know what I mean? And what can we add individually to make it sound like an Arkells song? But it's very different from song to song. Like sometimes, like I write, like 30-second demos of just a drum loop and a keyboard part. And I sent it to Max. I'm like, hey, just like, I literally, like, I think we have like a Dropbox folder, and Tim as well, like where he just sits there and plays a drum beat. Actually, Knocking at the Door started because, or Max wrote around a drum part, like the drum part in that song, like the fast snare roll thing was just a drum loop that Tim threw in a Dropbox, and the Max is like, oh, that's kind of interesting, and then put together the song around it, and then sometimes they're fully done, sometimes they're just bits and pieces. It really just, there's not really like and I think that's what kind of, to Max's credit, is that he's always searching for a new way to do something, so whether it's even writing with people that give him vocal melody ideas or whatever, you know what I mean? Like it's a very open-ended process.
We have a question from my hometown of Russell, Ontario. So this is from Rob Zorowski. He asks, with many talented musicians in the group, how do you balance creating an interesting and melodic song that fans will want to listen to versus making a song that is too busy and messy? When you're talented, you can do things that are super complicated, but most people, it'll go over their heads. So how do you find that balance between the simple and
I don't know. I don't, it's a good question. It is a good question because, there are, moments where you are showing off a little bit, and I actually, I think I am guilty of this a lot, where I try to really be very much like, no, I want to do this because I want to play this live because it's going to be so fun to play live. Like, and so sometimes I have a hard time disconnecting myself from that, where I'm like, am I doing this for the greater good of I remember there's a song on the new record called One Thing That I Know. And it's a very like intricate piano part that actually is like 3 or 4 layers of a piano part. So it takes up a lot of real estate, and I think a lot of it was just like, well, either I can just pad and be boring pad guy, and maybe that will work for the song, or I can kind of just like this dude's talking about, where like show
you
off.
You didn't leave any room for any of the other members to add.
You know what I mean? Like, but to do that, everyone finds their way, right? You know what I mean? Like Mike's got amazing stuff in that song that's like very like, George Harrison-esque. And Nick too, like, these like lines that come in. So I don't know. Yeah, we don't step too much on each other's toes. I think sometimes it feels that way because, you know, when you're given something at the top and then all you're hearing is one thing, you're like, well, where do I fit in? I don't know, fucking know what to do. Or even sometimes on the keyboard, I'm like, I don't know what to do. But you know, you work at it, right? And you find you find your way. As far as like everyone being great, I mean, you know what's great is that no one is really like, you know, we can shred and kind of fake our way through shredding, but no one's really like, and this is going back to like we're talking about, like, you know, I don't there are people that can run circles around me, you know, like I can't solo very well, you know what I mean? Like I can't, like, first of all, I hate, can't is a very negative thing to talk about, but like I don't work at that, right? Like I don't sit there and practice soloing, you know, like, because I think soloing is very cheesy. Like I grew up, dude, my first band I listened to was Kiss. And you know, you think those solos, you're watching them shred on stage, but dude, like he's probably played that night after night after night. Like they're not going out there being like, I'm going to be Herbie Hancock. And in Herbie Hancock's and Chick Corea's world, like they're amazing. And you know, like their vocabulary is great. I don't have that vocabulary. I never worked on it. So I can't go to then an Arkells gig and be like, here's my Herbie Hancock solo that I'm going to change night after night. We've done this solo bit. I was talking about the vaccine thing. Dude, I've been playing the same solo in different, you know, like I'll change it up enough that for me it feels fresh. But like I've been doing the same solo for like 9 years. Like it's the same solo, you know, like same note patterns, same, and it works. I mean, you know, like it keeps people on their toes, and no one is, I mean, a few people have called me out and been like, when are you going to change the solo? I'm like, I don't know. I don't really care to change it, you know, but yeah, you know, so it doesn't, it makes songwriting, you know, recording or whatever, like we're not able to kind of shit all over the song, you know, like it always will kind of find its way, you know, into kind of a concise, you know, framework or whatever, you know. Yeah.
So we're on to the 3 newest albums now. So we have Rally Cry 2018, Campfire Chords 2020, and Blink Once in 2021. So starting with Rally Cry, to me, it sounds like the albums start having a bigger sound to them, that things feel bigger. The production is bigger. The backup vocals sound like an audience singing back to you. It feels like the album was written with live performances in arenas and stadiums in mind. Like, hey, these would be great songs to play live with a big audience, you know, interacting with us. Was that all a conscious choice going into Rally Cry and Blink Once? To me, have this a bigger sound than the previous albums.
Yeah, again, not really thought out in that way, but I think it became like a natural progression where like there are things we do live that just work so well, and things we ended up realizing, like in terms of like, you know, like when you think about a song like Leather Jacket, it took a few months to kind of catch up while we were playing it, but we started kind of going like after month eight playing it or something like that, we're like, people are like really loud singing this back to us, more so than other songs that we've had. And so it's like, holy shit, that's kind of crazy. And then, so, you know, I think Max just internalizes that and then goes, yo, how can we, I mean, he's always been very much like on board with like, you know, crowds singing along to stuff, you know, and I think definitely the first few records are very evident of that, you know, but like very much big on like the Taylor Swift thing where you're going to sing the entire chorus back at me, right? So I think just experiencing it with bigger crowds just ended up translating. Like we didn't think to go like, oh, let's write an arena song. You know what I mean? Like Hand Me Downs, for example, which has like huge vocals on it, right? The O's and the chorus stuff was actually just inspired by seeing like Frank Turner, who plays big venues, but we on the tours that we were doing with him, you know, we were doing like House of Blues in the States. So they're punk venues, you know, so to speak. And you know, and he's getting like just these angsty kids screaming stuff back at him. And Max is like, I want to do a song like that. And, you know, does a song like that. But turns out that we're having to play arenas now. And so you're getting the big arenas singing it back at you, you know? So natural progression, nothing that we really thought through, you know, but definitely was maybe in the back of our minds, like getting into it.
I'm going to make a bold statement. So let me know if this makes any sense or if this is completely erroneous. If instead of music, if I was a painter, if I was painting with your first 2 albums, to me, the first two albums sonically are from like the same paintbrush or the same range of colors. And then to me, the next two albums, High Noon and Morning Report, they sound similar, but from a different range of the first two albums, if we're again using a color palette. And then the two newest, Rally Cry and Blink Once, they sound different than those other four albums, but they sound more similar sonically as well. Does that statement make any sense at all? It seems like they're in chunks of two where sonically they're more similar.
Yeah,
that was very hard to explain, as you probably experienced.
No, I feel you. No, I don't. It's tough because I'd have to go back and maybe listen to everything. But I think you probably bring up a good point, and I think a lot of that has to do with like just growth, right? You know what I mean? Like you're different. Like we're much. 12 years isn't a long time, or 11 years isn't a long time, but like you change so much in 11 years, you know, like so much has changed in the last 5, you know? So like, I'm sure plays out like that on recording, where like we're those people for those couple of records, and then things maybe drastically change, and then we're different people, you know? And even when you break down lyrically, when you think about like something like Rally Cry, where like we were living through, before that was written, we were living through like the election of Trump and all the noise like surrounding that, and everyone yelling at each other online, and then this one dude screaming at everybody, you know, through his Twitter account. And Max was like, you know, like it's an interesting thing to tell stories about, you know? And so at the time, that's just kind of where we were, you know, and maybe a little bit, you know, I think it all kind of plays into it. Like the culture plays into it, what we're doing, you know, who we're hanging out with, what we're vibing on. It all kind of becomes all encompassing, you know, with, so yeah, like maybe every 2 years or I guess it'd be 4 to 5 years, every 4 to 5 years, you go through kind of like a growth and change, and then you're doing something new musically, right? You know?
Yeah. I found that.
I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah.
But
I don't know if my question made sense, so it's hard to answer it. But
abstract, you know. But
I find that the two newest albums are definitely the biggest change sonically. I mean, the first 4 albums have more of the traditional rock hooks, and I find that the two newest ones have, you know, more like straight pop hooks, where there's more production that's on the dance side or the hip hop side. The drums, instead of sounding like, you know, the rock drums, it sounds like there's some programming going on as well. So just curious to touch on a little bit of that stuff.
Sure. Yeah. That's probably like, you know, every record we work with a different producer, right? You know, and so everything's going to have a different vibe. You know, like when we worked with Tony Hoffer for High Noon, you know, dude is like a synthesis guy, you know, and you know, we there's a lot of synth work on those records, you know, and then on that record particularly, and then something like Rally Cry, where we worked with Eric Ratz, who is like a meat and potatoes rock guy, you know, just makes things sound fucking huge. And we played a lot, like we didn't really play a lot live off the floor on that record, but you know, like, you know, we played together, and then everyone would we'd strip everything back, and then Tim would go back and record by himself, you know, or whatever. With the newest record, so Blink Once is, and we have another one coming out now, Blink Twice, and it produced by the same couple of guys. There's Derek Hoffman in Toronto, did a bunch of songs, and these guys fast friends in LA, Tom and Ryan. And when you think about like the pop stuff, it's like maybe we're working with a little more like pop producers who have just those tastes and flares, and just something that we haven't done before, where we've normally worked with like the rock guys, but again, High Noon with maybe a more synth-centric guy. It's yeah, you know, like just again doing that thing where it's like you don't want to sound the same, so it's like, oh, let's work with a producer that might do something different with the drums. Or like, for example, Tom in LA, who's part of this team, he's very much like the vocal guy. So like Max will come with a lyric or a melody and sing it, and then Tom will be like, yeah, but you know, straighten it out. So don't swing so much with it. And then it becomes like a very, like a pop melody, you know? And so, yeah, just taking things and learning but yeah, I think they're probably a little more pop. Um, but it's funny because, we go and play live and it always reverts back, right? You know what I mean? Like there's only, we play to some tracking, but the vibe is always, like there, especially when it comes to like drums. It's like, Tim's going to play, and he's going to hit stuff and it's going to sound huge and like a big rock song, so, what lives on the record doesn't necessarily need to be what you're doing live either. Right. So I don't know. Sorry, I'm jumbling around a bit. Actually, I think I was telling you, I got this like massage thing or right before our session, maybe an hour before, and she did this cupping thing. I just posted the picture like before our session on Instagram, and like I've never done that before, and like my back is on fire right now. So like if I'm rambling, it's just because I'm like sorry, I apologize, but
you're trying to survive the
I'm
onslaught
thinking
of
about my
words.
back. Like I just want to just dive into like cold water right now. Like it's crazy. So I'm like trying to keep my thoughts in order, but then I'm also like, what's going on in my back? Like, am I on fire? Like what's happening? So
It's one of those things where it feels horrible at first, and then probably in a couple of days you'll feel like a million
this is
bucks.
what she said. Yeah. She goes, the next 2 days are going to be rough. She goes, but you'll feel better and we'll start. Like I have so many knots. Like, I shouldn't be playing. Well, the way I play piano is not like, I learned with classical, like you sit upright and, your back straight and you're playing, keep proper technique. And then you play in a rock band and it all gets thrown out the fucking window. Right. Like now I'm like standing up and I'm hunched over and like
Jumping around and
kill my back, like, so.
yeah. You mentioned Eric Ratz. I have a quote here. So Eric Ratz, so he's he's won multiple Grammys and Junos as an engineer and producer. He's like, one of the biggest and best at what he does. So I have a quote here from Eric Ratz. He says, Tony has incredible musical style and intuition. When Tony joined the Arkells, I felt he had the perfect dynamic to help take the band to the next level. He's one of few musicians that I've worked with where I can ask, we need a part that is bright and shady and then delivers better than what I asked for with a perfect character and execution. A true gem. So that's from Eric Ratz.
Nice dude. I love working with him. He's like, he's just the nicest guy. And like, we just have so much fun in the studio together. And yeah, that's great. Yeah. Thanks.
He
yeah.
keeps
it's all good. Yeah.
he keeps coming up as I interview more and more bands. It all comes back to, Eric Ratz mixed this, Eric Ratz produced that. So you start to see in the Canadian music industry how close, how close everyone is there. So I have a question. This is out of Toronto. This is from Kelly D. She asks, as an accomplished Canadian band, how does the music scene in Canada differ from the rest of the world? The music scene in Canada seems very close-knit. That's funny. That's what we're talking about. Second question is, if they had to pick one song that they are most proud of, which would it be? It can be from any album. So is that like picking a favorite child? Like it's hard to...
Yeah, it's always different, and it's different, to say like, which is there. Like it's all, everyone's got a different favorite, like I think at the moment, like we were talking about Strong, I've never I do a lot of session work for artists, and a lot of the time you don't get a chance to really, you have to be in and out. You're paid to be there for 5 hours or whatever it is, and you have to deliver. So you're not thinking, outside the box too much, you're not, or getting to spread your wings a little bit, so at least that's my experience with it. But with that tune particularly, like I've not ever, like I'm just I'm so proud of that part, and that to me is like going to be my baby for a long time, because it's just like it's a in a band where I don't get to do a lot of like real piano playing. A lot of it is chordal and aggressive, to then be able to write a part that is just like an actual piano part. I mean? Like you would read music to play this part. That is like really hits close to home. And
then the first part was the Canadian music scene. How does it differ from the rest of the world?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, other countries are, bigger and have a ton more money to play with, and like they're just different beasts, but I think it's all kind of the same. I bet you someone in the UK would be like, dude, it's such a small scene. I don't know. Right. But I don't know. Yeah, it's a good question. Like I think probably the States and Canada are a little closer. I've always kind of had this thing in my head with the UK where they don't take any bullshit. Like you have to be like the top of when you think about the artists that have come out of the UK, like it's kind of crazy. Like the best of the best of the best. And I did a gig once. It was like and I was talking to this person about it. And I'm like, because they were coming from the UK and coming here, and he was just like, it's impossible to work there like as a gigging musician because you have to be literally like the best. You cannot fuck up. Like they just do not accept anything less there. Like the people get fired like mid, at least this is what I heard. I don't know how truthful this is, I'm pitching conspiracy theories at people here, but like like he was saying like people get fired like mid gig, like if they're not holding their weight, so I think there's probably a little more like, and maybe it's just because maybe it's smaller and, older, maybe they just don't have time for bullshit, but I always admired hearing that from him, but yeah, I wouldn't know. I don't know. I'm, part of the Canadian music industry. We can talk about, how small that
Proudly
is.
representing the Canadian
Yeah,
music
fuck yeah, man.
industry.
It's great.